And welcome back to the Book and Life podcast. Today I have somebody I truly admire, because if you can do children's and young adults and be actually really entertaining with them, you're going to be somebody I admire and think the world of. Because as a writer, you know yourselves, if you're struggling with your own work, then sometimes YA feels impossible and children's books feel even more difficult. So I cannot wait to introduce this amazing woman who has so much talent. I couldn't believe what I'd stumbled on when I found her, and I can't wait to share her with you today. But first, as you all know, as it's been, I will read the blurb for The Shadow, which is a YA novel for the Time Guardian series, and it's book number 4. The battle is over, the war is won, the prophecy complete, but life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan. Struggling to cope with tragic loss, at odds with friends in the Guard, he finds himself adrift, jumping at shadows and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess Athena's death, Giselle swears revenge to nullify the Immortals' plan for world domination. Giselle hadn't planned on love, and that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart, or the strings of a goddess short on praise, but high on expectation, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the Guard and the Order battle through the past and into an impossible future, darkness lurks around every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with just one. Is it friend or foe? Who stands in the shadows? And just a reminder that Rosemary Aitken is going to be donating all of her royalties from her Roman British crime series, which is written under her maiden name, Rosemary Rawi. All editions can be found online and will go to aiding the war in Ukraine and the refugee effort. So with that being said, I cannot wait a second longer to introduce you to Lou Abercombie. Please tell me I pronounced that right, because I freaked out with my hubby and I'm like, oh my god, I'm not going to get this right. It's going to go wrong. So please tell me I got that right.
Yes, Abercrombie.
Woo!
Many people get it wrong. You can hear when you get those cold calls, people kind of go, is that Mrs. Abercrombie?
Yep.
And they can't get it right. It's Abercrombie, like the fashion brand, but nothing to do with the fashion brand.
Well, it's a good way to get tied into it, I suppose. Well, my husband, funnily enough, he's called Ian and Fleming, so he gets a lot of the James Bond jokes.
Of course, yes.
But it's gotten worse because people are now actually tying him to the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang series.
Oh.
So, yeah, he, bless him. And the thing is now I'm Fleming. So, yeah, I kind of you know that way where people ask you what your husband's name is, and then I'm like, I don't want to answer this because I know where this is going.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, it's fun. We just got married in November there, so yeah, still getting used to the old last name. I did it today. I was at a hospital for an appointment, and the physio came out and she was like, "Crystal Fleming." No answer. Crystal Fleming. And Ian's like, "That's you." Sorry.
You'll get used to it. It'll happen.
I know, it's weird. We've been together 14 years, but it's obviously not as man and wife, so it's totally throwing me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But he laughs at me every time, which I think makes it worse. So I have to talk about this because I'm a huge mermaid fan. Okay. So I grew up in Shetland where we had selkies and mermaids, and those were kind of our big, our superheroes were mermaids and selkies. So when I saw coming up for air and it was somebody swimming and it gave me selkie vibes. I don't know, selkie mermaid vibes. And I was like, oh, woman after my own heart.
Yeah.
So I gotta hear more about this. How did you come about creating it? Where did you get the idea from?
Well, I'm a big swimmer. my first book was all about swimming, and in that book there is a swimming club called the Mermaids. So there was a kind of link there already. And when I was doing a swim round in Copenhagen, you can do an open water swim around the canals. And when I was doing it, 2018, I think, I saw a load of mermaids swimming because there were people with the tails and the full get up doing the swimming event, and they were amazing swimmers because obviously you need to have an amazing kind of butterfly stroke to be able to do it. So anyway, I saw those, which kind of inspired more of the writing. And then when I was looking around for the next project, the next idea, I think I was just Googling mermaids for some reason, because I felt like I wanted to keep the swimming, but maybe go in a slightly different direction. And I saw an article by someone who had wanted to be photographed as a mermaid, and they'd gone and done a freediving course down in Newquay. And as part of that, you can be photographed dressed up as a mermaid. So I thought, I fancy doing that. So I did.
I do actually, and I'm pretty scared of the water. But that might be an island thing.
Yeah, that might be. So basically, I did a 3-day mermaid course. First 2 days were doing this AIDA level 1 and 2 freediving course.
Yeah.
And the third day was the kind of final bits of doing the mermaid, so how to pose underwater, how you do the breath and everything like that. And then they brought in a photographer, and we got to choose our mermaid tails, choose our mermaid bikini, which I will say was made in China, where clearly the women don't have the size bust that I do. And so lots of the photographs, every now and then, when I saw the photographs, I was like, can you, a little bit of under boobage going on there. So he had to do a fair amount of Photoshop on that. So I can imagine. Yeah. But the thing I found was that I absolutely am terrible at freediving. I am wonderful at swimming, but I prefer staying on the surface and not going down. I don't mind doing a little bit of going down underwater, but I wasn't a natural at it all. I'm not very good at holding my breath and posing as a mermaid. Basically, things like looking at the camera underwater makes you go cross-eyed. Trying to hold your breath, pose, stay underwater, not look at the camera, make sure that your bikini top doesn't ride up and reveal everything. It was just very, very difficult. So I do have some photographs, and my author photo actually at the back of Coming Up for Air is my mermaid photo, but it's kind of the best of a really bad bunch of photos and the thing is, you forget, like, your hair, when you're underwater, what does your hair do? And I've got short hair, and it didn't do that. It just looked terrible. So I did a mermaid course. So that gave me the idea for my book, because I wanted to create someone who was the opposite to me, i.e. someone who found that they were naturally good at freediving.
Wow. I love that. And funnily enough, you mentioned that because outdoor swimming is what we do in Shetland.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we have to be very careful because there's killer whales that visit Shetland on a regular basis. Wow. So you just need to be a little bit more aware of where they are.
Yes.
But I myself, because we were thrown into the sea as children so that we would learn to survive and cope in the North Sea, due to the fact that they had a lot of kids who'd fallen in and didn't know what to do. So one of the sessions that we went swimming, I actually got chased by a seal.
Yeah.
I don't know what he thought I was.
Oh, wow.
I didn't have flippers on. I was just in this little wetsuit my friend lent me, and I'm swimming like normally, and then he suddenly starts swimming next to me and looking at me, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to continue on, maybe he'll go away. And then the next thing I felt was him nibbling at my feet. So I swam faster, and he thought this was a game, and oh my goodness, by the time I got out the water, I was absolutely out of breath, panting, and the seal was sitting at the end of the beach just staring at me with a big smile on his face. I was like, oh. But now, funnily enough, that same seal jumps in and out of the water at the fishing boats, and he is huge.
Oh wow!
He's the size of a small boat now.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
that's
they've all
lovely.
given him fish off the ends of their boats as they come in. But yeah, that was the thing about us. We had to be obviously a little bit more aware of the wildlife.
Yes, I have swum with seals, but they weren't interested in me actually. Um,
Be very grateful. It seems to be if you've got colored feet.
oh,
That's what I've learned. If you have colored feet, or you're in a very black or gray dry suit,
oh,
they tend to think of you as one of them,
oh,
and
okay.
then they want to play with you. But
Yes.
what they forget is that if they actually pierce the dry suit, it fills with water. So I had that situation too, where I was dry one minute, next minute, ooh, that's a lot of cold water.
Yes, I bet the water's cold in Shetland as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it never ever is warm, but it is so blue. That's the thing. It's like tropical looking water, but then you step in it, and it's like you've just stepped into an ice.
Oh, I'm gonna
Do you
have
know what I mean? An ice field.
I'm gonna have
Oh,
to come up there and swim sometime. 'Cause that's definitely have to do
it's
that.
stunning, and I highly recommend it. There's so many free like swimming clubs up there.
Right.
They're not into doing it in a mermaid way because it's so you get a really strong sea up there. So they're all in. There's occasional ones that'll do it in bikinis, but they're all in like dry suits usually
Yeah.
because most of them have common sense. It's
Yes.
usually the tourists that go in their bikinis and then they suddenly run back out again, and then you see all the Shetland ones that are like, you can get a dry suit with LHD down on the main street. They actually give them directions to my dad's shop where he sells all these dry suits and stuff like that. But yeah, it's stunning. It really is stunning out there, and you can see just. I mean, to swim at the cliffs and have the birds all swimming above you and seeing the puffins and being able to swim with them. They're a little bit snappy, but
Mm.
they're beautiful to watch, and just seeing them diving down next to you and going up is quite amazing. I just got puked on one by one, but I was a little too, I didn't realize I got too close to the nests, essentially,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it was trying to scare me off or what, but I don't think it meant to puke on me. Luckily I was in the water, so I cleaned it off pretty quick. But
Mm.
yeah, no, it was crazy, and that's what I grew up with, and I love meeting other swimmers because I can't do it anywhere. I'm on the mainland, so I don't go outdoor swimming. I'm lucky if I can go in a swimming pool sometimes. But yeah, that was something I grew up with, and I absolutely adored it. That and have you done the cliff climbing next to the ocean? So you climb up the cliff and you jump off into the water.
No, I'm a little bit more cautious in that regard. I
I
did
did
have
that a
it
few
somewhere in
times as a
Wales.
teenager, so yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it in Shetland again. I would maybe want to do it with like a warmer sea, so you're not like frozen by the time you get to the top.
Well, yeah, Tombstone. I don't know. I think I've just lost some of my. I really like an adventure, but I don't know that I like doing that kind of
Dangerous stuff.
adrenaline-filled thing now. That's a bit too scary these days.
Well, I laugh because all my friends were like, "Oh, you climb a cliff and you'll jump into the ocean, but you'll not go bungee jumping." It's like, no,
Yeah, I
don't
wouldn't do
fancy
either
that.
anymore. No, no.
Yeah, but it's funny because the bungee jumping in Shetland, they take you up in the crane and then they drop you, and then they dunk you in the ocean, and then they stick you on the pier. And I'm thinking, I know how dirty that harbor is. No, I'm not doing that. That doesn't
No,
sound fun.
no.
Because I see everyone that's done it. They're like they say for like 3 days that they've gone through like 4 bottles of shampoo.
Well, my top tip
So
for that is to drink some Coca-Cola after. If you've been in any dirty water, drink some Coca-Cola to clean your stomach out.
yeah, that's what I said. And because they were all complaining about like it's the smell sticking to their hair,
Oh, right.
and that's why they were going through so much shampoo is because they're trying to get rid of that seaweed smell that you can, once you get it in your hair, you can't get it out. You just have to gotta roll with it and just say, "Oh, I've been in the ocean," just seem like a tough guy. That's what I always say. And then I saw your other book. and that was curious to me because I have never had the opportunity to sit down and speak to someone who does YA and children's. So I wanted to ask a little bit. Sorry?
They're technically the same, actually.
Okay.
They're both classed as teen, although you're not the first person to confuse Fig Swims the World as a middle grade and Coming Up for Air as YA. Actually, they're both classed as teen. But I think
that's something to learn.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why I instantly thought YA when I looked at the cover.
Mm.
That's strange.
I think it's down to the book cover, and as I say, I've been in other bookshops where Fig Swims the World is put in the middle grade section, and Coming Up for Air is put in the teen YA section, and they're both the same aged character. If anything, in Fig Swims the World, she's slightly older. So but the whole point is that it bridges the gap between middle grade and YA.
Oh, right, I see. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Because I was totally having a blonde, or at least I thought I was having one of those moments that, readers have. Because I looked at your site and I fell in love with, I love your design of your website. Much cleaner than mine. I am terrible at websites, I can tell you. So I fell in love with it, and then I love the fact that you've done photography and you've done a math book.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. I'm like, okay, this woman's amazing. I cannot do math to save myself. So yeah, it's just there wasn't anything like I always research everyone I talk to and I get on with and stuff. And some of them I have to like really sit and think, okay, what am I going to talk about? What do I want to know about? But with you, there was like, okay, how am I going to limit myself to what I'm going to ask? But I do want to ask about your maths book because I during the pandemic, I actually was a learning support assistant in Shetland, and then when I came down to the mainland, I was a learning support assistant on the mainland. So I'd love to kind of learn a little bit more about the mathematics book and things like that, because I'm just sort of curious. I wonder if it will help a lot of my my colleagues who've got teenagers who are coming into the high school and they don't like math at all. As any kid doesn't seem to like math on a Monday morning. And I'm just thinking this might be a great book for them to really kind of help them get over the hump of what they're dealing with.
Well, first of all, I did a math degree, which is why I do the maths. The book is out next January. It's actually for 9 to 11-year-olds, so it kind of falls into your middle grade. And it's about
that would be perfect for them.
Everyday maths. So it is kind of aimed at everyone. I mean, parents, adults, everyone. It's almost like a badge of honor that people say, "Oh, I don't like maths," or "I'm terrible at maths," or "I was terrible at it at school."
Know. Yeah.
And I love maths. It speaks to me. I get numbers. It's just there's an answer. You look at an equation and there is an answer. There's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. And I like the kind of black and white quality of that scenario, and I know where I am with it, and I don't know why. My children don't particularly like maths, and I've tried to infuse with them, and I help them with their maths. And they will say that I do explain things to them in a better way perhaps than their teachers do sometimes.
I got that as well, because I do it old school style. I don't do it the way they do it now, and I actually got pulled aside for that quite a few times. And I'm like, well, if the kid's not getting it your way, why not try it a different way and see if that works better for them?
Well, this is the crazy thing. There are more ways than one, and actually when you look at the methods, you're doing the same thing. You're just calling it something different, or you're using different terminology. And I guess it's a time thing that I just think everyone learns differently. And I think that we should be teaching maths in multiple ways. And if one way doesn't work for someone, then move on to another one. And I just don't think there's enough. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough time to do that. There's too much. I think they've moved the curriculum on so that kids are learning like simultaneous equations in year 4, which is something that I didn't learn until I got to secondary school, year 7. So I think there's some concepts there that they're introducing too early, or they're
Yeah.
not necessarily, I don't think the teachers necessarily know how to teach it because they don't quite get it themselves.
I would totally agree with that, because for me particularly, I'm dyslexic, and in Shetland at the time I was growing up, dyslexia was something that they were kind of aware of, but didn't want anything to do with. So we were all like stuck in a separate classroom. Whenever maths was going to happen, we were taken out of class, put in a separate room with one teacher who was, was like a senior teacher of all teachers, and she was supposed to explain maths to us. And I swear it made it worse because she didn't have multiple ways of teaching us. She had one way, and if we didn't get it, she would bawl and yell and accuse us of being lazy and everything else. And when I came back as a learning support teacher, I thought, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go in this direction. So I would sit and I would just slowly encourage them by, saying, okay, well, let's try it the teacher's way. And then if we don't get it that way, we'll try it this way.
Yeah.
And of course, the kids don't write out their maths anymore. Like, you remember how you used to write out the sums, and you would have you would actually write out plus whatever, and then you'd have a line underneath, and you would work it out the old-fashioned way. They don't do that anymore.
Don't they?
No, not in Scotland, they don't.
Because I'm always saying to my children, show you're working out. This is the absolute only way to do maths. Because if you get something wrong, you can go back and see where you've made a mistake. If they're not being encouraged to do that, then that's
and that's what surprised me.
Yeah.
And of course, the teacher pulled me aside and said, why are you getting them to write it out? That's just wasting time. And I said, no. I said, they're not getting it. So I'm doing it this way so that these other kids have an opportunity to learn. And one girl said, I love maths, but I don't understand the way she teaches it to me because my dad teaches me a different way.
Yeah.
And she goes, but he teaches me your way. And I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. Like, I was starting to feel like I was crazy. And I'm thinking, I've got foundation math and I'm doing primary school work. And I'm thinking, am I even going to be intelligent enough to do this? But I found that, because they give us the answer sheets, the learning support teachers, we walk around with the answer sheets. And then we've got to get them from the question to the answer, but without telling them.
Yes.
And because I had the answer, I could actually do it because I could work it out and explain it to them. And I never realized then how bad, it gave me an idea. I'm number blind with math. It's part of my dyslexia. And it really helped me understand it more because I was able to go, oh, okay, I can see why I maybe don't see this number or that number or whatever. And I was able to point out kids that with this sort of taking the time to write out their sums and write out what they're doing, were able to improve their grades almost by double.
Yeah.
Compared to the ones that were just writing down the answers.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I kind of believe in giving you the answer. So if you go, right, this is the question, this is the answer, let's see how we get there. Not all the time, obviously, but in terms of learning how and what's happened, what you've got to do, you can actually get it because you it's a bit scary, isn't it, when you don't know the answer to something. We all want to know what the answer is. So if we've got the answer, we have that security that actually we're not being judged on how we get to that answer. We want to learn how we've got to get there. So I actually think giving the answer is the answer. And I don't know whether it's taught that way. I'm guessing
it's not in Scotland. It's really not in Scotland. I mean, okay, the learning support teachers have the answers or the teachers have the answers, but we're told never to give the answer to the children and show them how to get there. And to me, I felt like that was such a disservice to some of them. But even just being able to help a handful of those kids improve meant the world to me, because I wished I had that kind of one-on-one support where it wasn't like a scribe just telling me, right, this is how you do it, but actually giving me the opportunity to learn it properly.
Yeah.
Because my dad, even though my dad is he's a whiz with numbers, but even he would get very frustrated teaching me maths because I couldn't see some of the numbers.
Right.
And I think we're progressing as a society, that we're able to help people that have got these learning difficulties, and we are making it better for them. But I still think there's a lot of learning to go to
Yeah.
get like kids to that level where everyone's equal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I like books like yours that come out and just make it very much about everyday life, because most of the kids I've worked with always say to me, well, I'm never going to use math.
Oh.
Like, how many times do parents hear that? Like, not just parents, teachers, everybody. I mean, I'm an aunt, and I hear it all the time from my cousins. And I am so going to buy a copy and hand it to my niece, being like, this is why you do it.
Well, no, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. It's basically covers the basics of maths and how we use it in our every single day life. So, it's.
I can swear my hubby is going to give it to me and be like,
yeah,
learn,
Yeah.
Because I was so awful. So it's nice, because it's nice to meet someone that's like, okay, you're not essentially awful, you're just not getting it. And I'm like, oh, it makes me at least feel better. And I know that there was a lot of kids in my foundation class that when we start our sort of standard grades or our O levels, we all felt really bad that we were coming in at a foundation level. And I mean, I think it wasn't too bad for me, because I could look back and say, well, I've had half an education, because I was in and out of hospital all the time, and I was working off of workbooks with very little support in the hospital, because we had a teacher that would come in Monday to Friday, but she only came in for a few hours, and you're trying to do schoolwork in a hospital bed with all these other hospital kids around you, and you're sick as a dog.
Yeah,
it's really difficult, and people don't realize that. So I didn't feel too bad about being in foundation, but I noticed like my other classmates were almost like ashamed of it.
Oh.
And it was almost like a stigma the teachers put on the kids, because they were like, oh, well, you're foundation.
Yeah.
Foundation classes as well. And they made a point in pointing out the kids that were foundation. So it almost became like a competition to climb this ladder of excellency. And yeah, I did. I felt for the ones that struggled and maybe weren't getting extra time at home with, for help with their parents or whatever. Yeah, I thought it was wrong. I really did. And I'm glad to see that at least in certain parts of Scotland, that is gone.
Yeah.
But I think we've made a mistake in not writing out the sums, and I think that should be kept in the curriculum moving forward. Now I just sound like I've got on a soapbox and had a rant. Not intended. I promise this, not all shows are like this. So let's move into like a safer area. Let's talk about books. What is the book you've read most recently that stuck with you the most? And it can be absolutely anything.
Okay. I read loads of books. I've got loads of author friends, so I'm constantly going to their book launches and buying their books. The most recent one I've read is a book called Day of the Whale by Rachel Delahaye. It's a kind of middle grade teen kind of book. It kind of doesn't quite fit into the full-on categories in that way. And it's a dystopian novel set in the future with Australia having experienced 3 floods. And so it's become an island, and they're all kind of, it's a mystery novel. It's about 3 kids who are trying to uncover what's really going on. It's kind of talks about the climate and environmental issues, but there's also a glimmer of hope. So it really stayed with me. It's a really well written book. There's lots of swimming in it, which of course appeals to me. And yeah, it's just really impactful. And I like the idea that we can imagine the worst that could happen, but also that there will still be a glimmer of hope that humanity can still turn things around. So,
I love that. Have you ever tried Debbie Galori's books?
No.
She's funny is the best way to describe her stuff. Okay, I know that's awful, and I know she's probably cringing somewhere over here in Scotland. But like her Wicked Dead series it's funny, and it's for that middle-aged kid who's trying to get into reading, and she's got this family who lives in a castle, and they've got Loch Nessie, and they've got like a crocodile that's a pet, and all this sort of weird stuff happens to the family through the series. And it's genuinely a fun series for sort of that middle-aged kind of middle grade audience. And she writes a lot of younger children's books too, like Tell Me Something Happy Before I Go to Sleep.
Oh.
And I thought, I have loads of her books in the house because this year I'm going to try and become a mom. So I'm like determined kids are going to get read to from the second that they're born right the way up, because that's mom.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I just think she's a wonderful writer that not a lot of people know about, and I just like putting it out there. She did a really good book about anxiety.
Oh wow.
And dealing with anxiety as a middle-aged sort of read. Yeah. And she uses dragons to explain it. And she explains like how you might deal with depression or if you get anxious about things. And I thought that's such a great book, because I wish I had a book like that when I was a kid, because I was one of these really anxious kids. And I thought, wow, like I couldn't believe it. I thought it was such a great find. And I know she gets tired of me plugging her, but I just think she's incredible. She really does some really good work. Yeah, I can't recommend her enough. I think she's great.
Yeah, I'll check her out, definitely.
Yeah, I like doing that, like sharing kind of like authors with other people, because sometimes you wouldn't know, and then you discover something really cool. So
there's so many authors out there. It's if you go into bookshops, I went into Waterstones in Piccadilly in London, and wow, I mean, it's a bit humbling when you go in as an author, because you know we're all sitting here trying to type away at the next novel, and then you see all the books that are out there, and but then you know you can get through a lot of books, can't you, in a year? I mean,
I read about 30 a year, and I think I would read more if the dyslexia wasn't such an impact on me.
Yeah,
because like I can only read 20 pages, and then I have to stop and I have to go away and do something, and then come back, because otherwise I fall asleep.
Right.
And I don't know if it's eye strain or what it is. I'm supposed to be getting some sort of fancy dyslexia test, because I've not had it done since I was a teenager. So that'll be interesting. I'm sort of learning a little bit more about dyslexia now than what I necessarily knew before. And one thing that I discovered is see kids that you watch them and they get really into reading, and then all of a sudden they stop. Those are the kids that you'll find, or the ones that take a really long time to read. Those are the ones that are actually struggling with something like dyslexia.
Right.
Because their brains almost go, okay, I'm bored. Or I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. Their brain's always kind of moving on to the next thing. And not only that, the words start moving.
Oh, wow.
So there's nothing worse than trying to like catch the words running across the page.
Yeah.
And I used to think I was falling asleep when that would happen. And then there was one day I turned to my scribe and I said, Annie, those words are running across the page, right? And she sort of looked at me and she went, no, Crystal. And I went, oh. She says, I think you need to go for a pee or a walk or something.
Yeah.
So I made an excuse, went to the bathroom, threw water on my face, came back, and that's all I needed was just that little 5-minute break to just let my brain settle back down so I could focus. But to think like she had no training in dyslexia, and to think that she could clock and work out how to do all that, I thought was exceptional. So you never know. Like I always say, people surprise you and you learn some really great things.
The thing I get when I'm reading now is a bad habit I developed when my children were young, and you know how they just want to be read the same old story every single night. I developed a habit of being able to think about something else at the same time as reading out loud. And so when I'm reading now, I find my brain starting to run off and start thinking about other things. And then I go, I know I've read the words, but I have absolutely no idea what those words actually amounted
Yep.
to. So I have to keep going back and reading the same paragraph again. So it's a kind of a habit that was kind of handy at the time when my children were young, and now I'm like, oh, I don't want to be, I want
It's
to
very
think.
hard to get out of it, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it really is.
Yeah, no, I'm terrible because sometimes I'll be reading a book and I'll think, that's the solution to my to my book problem, and I've not taken in anything I've read. I could have read 3 or 4 pages, and I know I read the words.
Yeah.
But my brain was working on the problem for the novel.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm going to have to go back and read that all over. And I get so frustrated, and then hubby will be like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just figured out a problem in my book. And he's like, oh, good, you don't need to talk to me about it then. He hates it. He hates being my sounding board. Bless him. Because I do have a tendency, I'll get an idea at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And he's been driving buses all night, and he'll be like, go to sleep. Which is the nicest thing he says to me, go to sleep. Because I'll be like, Ian, what if I did this? And he'll be like, Crystal, I have driven buses all day. I've listened to idiots all day. I just want to sleep. Go to sleep. Because he can't sleep if I'm up and I'm moving about. So I have to almost lie there and just wait till the alarm clock goes off so I can go write down whatever it is that's in my head. So yeah, the joys of writing and having a husband, I think, is interesting. I'm a little bit scared about adding a small person into this equation. If you had time to just sit and relax and, you know, enjoy reading as reading, who would you sit and read, and why would you pick them? Like, would it be a series? Would it just be an author? Who would it be, and why? Is essentially the question. It's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. I mean, I don't tend to read series. Although I was reminded, I was in a bookshop the other day and I saw the Fortunes of War trilogy, or the Balkan trilogy. Okay. I don't know whether that was made into a TV series with Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So that and other series like Dance to the Music of Time. So they're the kind of, I like those series, but I haven't found one that I've kind of wanted to get into. So I tend to stick to authors, and I'm a massive fan of American novelists like Anne Tyler, Fanny Flagg. I don't know whether she wrote Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe.
I've heard of the title. I just couldn't remember who. Like, that's my problem. I remember a title, but not the author.
So that's probably going back to the 1990s. But I love that kind of female novel about some girls growing up in small town America and then growing into.
I do love that as well, I must admit.
I just love that kind of novel. And I haven't found many recently. I do still read Anne Tyler regularly, but I think as she's getting a bit older, some of her stories I don't feel are quite so, I don't know, applicable or enjoyable to me as they used to be. So I'm always open to more suggestions in that regard.
I would recommend Rachel Keane, because she did 2 incredible small town stories. She did one that it was like a quadet, is that how you pronounce it? Where it's like 4 books essentially, and it was about the weather. So it was called Stormfront. It was the first one, and it's about these storm chasers from this small town in America, and they chase weather. So that, I thought that was really fun. And I kind of met her. She did Morgan Vampires, so she actually creates her own rural town with this university, and all these kids come to this university, and there's physics, and she uses physics a lot in her books. And I know it's quite a long series, but it was fun. Every book you laughed at least once. You know, you can't take a vampire seriously when he's running around in vampire crazy slippers and you know, like he stole grandma's curtains to make a shirt, and, you know, trousers that don't quite fit right. And her description really does bring those images out incredibly well, and it makes it genuinely a lot of fun. So I always recommend her. Sadly, she's actually she's just passed on last year, but she really does come out with some amazing pieces. Or at least she did. But you should give them to a try, because I think they're quite good, and they sort of have that kind of, they grab you almost, and then you don't really want to let go. So that's kind of what I enjoyed about them anyway. And they're YA, so they're good. I think they're good. And if you like sort of like homegrown stories, I'm just thinking, you heard of Catherine Cookson?
Yeah.
You have?
I haven't read any.
Wow! Do you know so many guests come on here and they don't know her?
Really? But she wrote hundreds of books, didn't she?
Yeah, she did, but so many people don't know her.
Oh, really?
It's incredible.
She's probably quite dated now, though, isn't she?
I think a lot of her stuff came out in like early 90s.
Yeah.
Sort of 80s, 90s.
Yeah, I was reading things like Sidney Sheldon in those days, and Mary Wesley.
Yeah.
Do you remember all of those? There's loads.
Oh, yes, I do.
She kind of
funnily enough,
that.
I picked her over everything. Like, I started off with Marianne Curley. She did a fantastic series. I'm actually reading her newest series, which is the Time Guardian series, which I'm plugging. But she also did Old Magic. Now, that's a really good middle grade YA. And she's Australian.
Right.
And it's time travel, and you've got magic, and you've got all these different elements that just makes it really good. And this girl's sort of coming of age, and this young boy's coming of age, and it's awkward. They have their awkward sort of phase in there too, and it's just really enjoyable. And the other one was Celia Reese, which is actually a famous English children's writer.
Oh, right.
So she did like YA thrillers for kids.
Okay.
And she said the whole point of it was she wanted to get them excited, but give them a little bit of like a twist or a gluff. And she wrote Witch Child, which is one of a trilogy. And it's about a girl who's accused of being a witch, and she ends up hiding her journal, her pages of her journal, in blankets, in a quilt she's making. And then it turns out that somebody's found this quilt and opened it up and found the pages inside. And I just think that's so fascinating. It's such a really awesome one. And it is historical drama, but it's a small girl in England whose whole life gets turned upside down, and she's got to almost run for her life.
Yeah.
And it's such a great story to see her grow up as these pages progress. Plus, I was terrified the whole way through. I'm like, she's got to make it out. She's got to make it out. And like, she was so good at keeping that kind of tension going.
Yeah.
You just couldn't put it down. And however, I must admit, as a kid, I used to wrap up Old Magic in the Witch Child in a pillowcase. Yeah. And then stick a ribbon around it, because I was always convinced the characters were going to come out the book at night and scare me.
Oh, wow.
So my mom's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And she opened up the pillowcase, and she looked inside, and she's like, "Why is there 2 books in here?" And I'm like, "They need to be hidden. Trust me."
Oh,
and my mom's always just...
that's the power of writing, though, isn't it? That's amazing. That kind of connection with you.
And it's very funny because a lot of people, they also don't know Celia Reese. And, she's an icon of children's writing from Britain. So I always kind of I've had her on the show. She's honestly one of the most amazing women. So I brought her on, and we had such a great time talking. I think we ended up going 2 hours and a half because we shared a lot of similarities. But yeah, I mean, those are really good ones to try if you're looking for that sort of YA middle grade area to sort of jump into. And obviously, Catherine Cookson a very realistic writer. So she is very much the modern day blue collar worker type stories. So you kind of expect the struggles of a small town, but with a blue collar edge to it. Yeah. And everyone really kind of connects with her because it's very realistic things that she brings up. Like, I admire her because she brought up racism in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, this was years before Black Lives Matter and all this movements. She also brought up women's rights movements before women's rights movement was a thing. And it's just amazing. Just everything that she came out with was to point out politically, but in a really kind of down-to-earth way that you don't... I always call it accidental learning with her, because you're reading a really good story, but you're accidentally learning about things. And it's great. I just think her talent is so good, and I really hope she doesn't disappear. I really, I don't care if I have to wear the banner to try and keep her name out there, but I just think if you find these really good authors and, they're not here anymore, we should all kind of pick up that kind of banner and keep them alive.
Yeah, definitely.
Because good work shapes all of us, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I could sit and talk about different book references all day. Sad but true. So, what author do you wish that if you were to sort of like sit and really think about it, who would you say inspired you to read, and then past or present, and who would you say is inspiring and influencing you to write?
Okay. I was a massive reader when I was a kid, and I loved Judy Blume, which kind of goes back to the whole kind of small town America kids thing. Yeah. I think I've always liked slice of life kind of real stuff than anything else, although I definitely read things like The Worst Witch.
Those were good.
Yeah, but then, and also, Mallory Towers and some of the others. The Chalet School books, which were...
Yep.
I was obsessed with those. I remember going to the bookshop and I just didn't care which one I bought. I mean, if I could find one that was in the, the right order, great. But if I couldn't, I didn't mind. And actually, I've bought a few of those for my daughter, and I did read them, and they're incredibly dated and completely out of
fun still.
But they're still so fun. The main characters in them, they're just really strong girl characters, and at the time that's what really inspired me when I was reading. So I'd say when I started writing, I probably wanted to be like Judy Blume because I just love her style. But I don't know. I don't know that I can say whether there's... I just read all the time now, because I find that whatever I read, I'll be reading a paragraph and go, oh, I like that use of that word, or the way they've phrased something, and I will try that in my writing. So I wouldn't say that there's a particular author that inspires me now. It's more that I just take it all. When I wrote my first book, I stopped reading completely because I just found that I didn't want to do it. I wanted to concentrate on the words that were in my head. But now I've gone past that stage, and I'm comfortable having, reading someone else's and having my own ideas in my head. And I just think that's the best way to write is by reading.
Really. Yeah, I mean, I always say this, like, I make a point of reading 20 pages a day, every day.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be a discipline where you're reading to improve your own craft, but you're also writing to improve your craft. It has to go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. At least that's the way I've been taught, and I've had the luxury of learning from different people. And I find that really helped me on my journey. It's so funny you mentioned a couple of those books. Did you try the Heartland series when you were young?
No.
It's this girl who actually works with horses.
Right.
And these horses are all kind of dealing with trauma, and she learns from the horse as much as the horse learns from her. And she's such a strong female character. Now, I have totally forgotten the author. I really wish that wouldn't happen to me. But that series, I used to go into the bookshop, kind of like you did, and I would try and find the next one in the order. And if I couldn't, I would just sit and read that one. And because my mom was a bit strict on like books. And I must admit, I was so glad this past year I got them all.
Oh, wow.
I got the whole lot, and I'm keeping them for my, I hope I have a girl, keeping them for my daughter so that I could sit and I could read them and say, horses are spiritually very much like us. And show her my love for horses, but without having to drag her to the stables and get her to ride for her to understand that. But no, that one is actually worth it. You might actually, they're not dated either, which I think is incredible, considering they came out, gosh, years and years and years ago. But they've also been made into a TV series called Heartland. I don't know if you've got Netflix, but it's on there, and they're like 15 seasons in or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's been around for a long time. For only, I think she only did 27, 28 books.
Only?
Yeah, only. But, I mean, they're not very big books. And then you think 15 seasons.
Yeah.
Of all that is incredible. You could just imagine the writer having to plot out an entire season with a 20, less than 100-page book.
Thinking, that's a lot.
Go do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she totally blew my mind with her books, and it felt, because I had ridden horses all my life, but it felt like being there working with that animal, it was so realistic. I love that. I love those kinds of books where you really get to feel like you're part of it. So what author do you wish, if you had a chance, and they can be living or dead, that you could sit and speak with? Who would it be and why?
Hands down, it would be Dorothy Parker.
Okay, I'm curious to hear the why for this one.
Because she's just so funny and witty and scathing, and it would just be wonderful to hear it from her, really. I think my own sense of humour is very sarcastic and scathing.
Same.
And so I kind of like... And she's very, very intelligent. So you could imagine the conversations you could have with someone like her in this day and age, with everything that's going on across the world. I would love to hear what she has to say about some of the people. Not to get political, but, I think she'd be fantastic. She had such a witty comment about absolutely everything. She was also very ahead of her time in terms of feminism and all of that. So I think it would be fascinating to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Have you tried Alison Smith's books?
No.
Ali Smith.
Right.
She's such a witty Scottish author. She did a book called Hotel World, set with this hotel, and it had every chapter had a different character.
Oh, wow.
But it all tied back to this hotel. You talk about sarcasm and wit, and she slips in her thoughts on politics in it.
Wow.
But you don't notice it by just how creatively she does it.
Oh, wow.
I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about her either until I did my second year BA honors course. And then I discovered it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is she's Scottish? And then I was like, oh, okay. And she's actually from a small town in Scotland called Thurso. And it's very interesting to read a different kind of book, because, I mean, her opening line to Hotel World was, woohoo!
Oh, wow.
It's okay, where's this going? That's the first word and only word on the page.
Gosh. Okay.
So it does make you want to turn it. Yeah. I will give her that. So,
wow.
She kind of stood out, just when you were saying about those different ideas. She kind of stood out to me, and I was like, oh, she'll really like Ali Smith. So, yeah.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
If you could go back in time, where would you go and why?
Oof. Where would I go back in time?
It's one of those difficult questions, I think.
Isn't it? Because honestly, I think as awful as times are at the moment, I think I would struggle to go back anywhere because of the different attitudes towards women, racism, all of that. I just don't know that I would want to go back and it's easy to look back on history and a certain time with rose-tinted glasses.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I would want to go back to any other time, which is bizarre because everyone always wants to time travel and, I don't know, see dinosaurs or whatever. But
I would be scared it got eaten.
well, yeah, there's always a downside, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be kind of interesting to go back to a Georgian time and see the fashions and that, but then there'd be such a negative side in terms of the smell and how people were treated, and so I don't think, I'm sorry to say, I don't think I'd want to go back anywhere at all.
I mean, I'm a fan of the Victorian style of dress,
Yeah,
and all the houses and the way they were built and stuff. That I would love to, but then I think of like all the crazy medical stuff they were doing back then, and I think about all the poor hygiene and everything else. I'm like, oh, nope, staying here.
yes, that's
quite happy here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just I guess we take everything for granted, don't we, that we have today, and all the technology and all the creature comforts.
But here's a more interesting question. If you could go back as a writer and document a certain time, would you? And where would you go?
I'm a big fan of the Bloomsbury group of writers, so Virginia Woolf and her Vanessa Bell, her sister, and Duncan Grant. And so I would like to be a fly on the wall in Charleston, which I got to visit a couple of years ago, just before the lockdown. And I would like to kind of, live among the Bohemians, I think would be the best.
That would actually be a lot of fun, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I must admit, I have put that question in for so many different authors, but to be honest, I probably couldn't answer it myself. Because there's too many times that I'd actually want to go back and be that kind of fly on the wall writer, to document it. Just for fun, I think, more than anything. Has there ever been a book that you've picked up and you thought, why have I picked this up? Like, what am I doing here? And had to put it down?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's numerous books that I've never finished. The book that I persevered with, but almost wished I hadn't, was is it The Goldfinch? Donna Tartt's Goldfinch, I think it's called.
Oh yeah. I know what you mean.
I thought the opening was just brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic. But and then it became I think I read it a couple of years ago over lockdown, so I had plenty of time to be reading. It's a very long book, and it also just doesn't live up to its kind of opening premise and the kind of first 25%. Absolutely amazing, absolutely loved it. And then it just went off on some very weird tangents, and I was kind of reading it going, I really don't care what's going on. But I kind of I wanted to finish it, and I did finish it, but I didn't really have a satisfied, I'm glad I read that type thing. But I would still say that the opening was just so fantastic, and what happened, the inciting incident of what happens is just brilliant. It was just a massive disappointment. And I know loads of people love it, so it's probably one of those Marmite books, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think some people can kind of get by some of it, the tangents, as you were saying, and I think some people kind of get stuck in that. And I think a lot of writers, if we're being very close with the attention to detail and things like that, we can see those tangents, and they were almost like, girl, get back on, get back on topic. And being somebody that used to write tangents, I know that one really well. And yeah, I used to have a friend who would be like, Crystal, tangent, come back. It's like, so she was really good at reining me in. So we're moving into the writing portion of the podcast, which I know a lot of newbie writers tend to listen in, because they're all looking for tips and tricks on how we put our novels together and things like that. So how do you go about creating those moments of, I always call it like threats, like they're not going to quite achieve what they're looking for, or they're not going to achieve their goals, or there's like somebody trying, some obstacle or somebody getting in the way. How do you mentally go about getting into that sort of place?
Um, it's funny. I was doing a workshop on Friday, and I was being asked this sort of thing, and I don't. I'm not a planner. I'm not a plotter. I'm more of a pantser, and so I tend to come up with a premise of an idea, usually a character, and I start them off in a certain scenario, and then I just write. I get lots of dialogue, and I write, and so I find it very hard to sort of explain how I come up with things because, in a way, I'm not thinking that through.
Yeah.
The way I tend to write is I write in three parts. My first part tends to be about 25,000 words, and at the end of that part is when the character is at kind of, it's not that the lowest ebb necessarily, but they're at a really cliffhanger moment where they just feel awful, and it becomes the point where maybe 10,000 words later, when we're in the middle of the book, there is a turning point where they realize they actually need to do something about their situation in order to get what they want or need by the end of the book.
Yeah.
And the second part is then another cliffhanger where it's again feels like everything's falling apart, which then leads into your climax and the rest of it in part three. So that's how I tend to. So I have a 25,000 word part one, a 30,000 word part two, and a 10,000 word part three, and that's rough. Whenever I'm writing, I always refer back to what I've written before, and I kind of go back and have a look at the numbers and see where it is. And so when I get stuck, what I tend to do is I'll write in giant capital letters, this is my midpoint, this is my climax. And so that when I zoom out so I can see, tons and tons of pages at once. I can see the shape of the novel when I'm zoomed out.
Okay.
And that enables me to fill in. And the other thing I do is I write out of sequence. So I don't write from start to finish. I will just write the scenes that I want to write. Or I'll quite often write two scenes and realise that they're so similar, actually, they should be the same scene. And then you get this situation where you're kind of trying to decide which part it goes in. So that tends to be how I write, more than really thinking about what those dark moments are. I just think those just, I could do this with that person, or this could happen. It's kind of, and actually quite often, because I write out of sequence, I will write something and a character will say something and it will inform me what has come before. So they'll say, oh, you did this, didn't you? And then I go, oh, that's what I need to write in the scene, I don't know, 3 days ago or whatever. So it's the writing that kind of informs what's going to happen, really. I let it kind of take me somewhere. And I always get stuck. I always get to the point where I go, I don't really know what this character's arc is. And I have to... I tend to write a synopsis which points out where I'm going wrong. But that tends to be how I write, more than really planning it out and planning out those awful dark moments for the poor characters to go through.
You're probably the first one that's explained that in perfect detail, to which anyone, you don't have to be a writer to understand that.
Right.
And I think that's really good, because I know that there's so many people that struggle with that particular thing. And to hear somebody being able to give a different point of view on it is going to help so many new writers out there.
Oh, good.
Because I know a lot of them get stuck and they get frustrated and then they just give up. And I think you're offering them almost like a different option. And I think that's really, really incredible and fun.
Oh, good.
But I have to ask, what inspired you to pick sort of middle grade to YA novels? Right.
Do you know what? It's just the voice that came out of me. I think it's the time, in a way, I'm writing the books that I would have liked to have read when I was 10, 11, 12, 13. When I was that age, there wasn't a YA section at all. So I remember going into the bookshop and my mum just let me buy anything. I didn't want to read the children's books by then because I was a capable reader. And so I picked up Barbara, I think it was Barbara Taylor Bradford's Garden of Eden. And it's incredibly grown up for an 11 going on 12.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
And so that's But I just remember pulling books off my parents' bookshelf. I read Poldark. I don't remember anything about it, but I read the entire series because I just wanted to read. I needed material to read. And
Yeah.
so in a way, I'm kind of writing for the me when I was
Yeah.
that age. And you don't always want to read about, like YA these days, there's a lot of sex in it, or can be. There's a lot of
Yeah.
violence and so on. And I think that can be a bit scary for someone who's just starting in their teens. So
Yeah,
the
it
whole
is a little
point
bit,
about
yeah.
teens is that it's sort of, I call it clean teen. So you can feel confident that what you're reading is trying to introduce you into the life of being a teenager and growing up, but you don't need to worry
Yeah.
that there's things in there that you're not going to be comfortable reading.
I think that's really good that you said that, because for me, like, I've noticed over the years, YA, almost like since the outbreak of Twilight, which was considered YA, then, we've seen such a huge influx of YA material, but it's almost like some of the authors don't understand what YA is for. And you get a lot of these more grown up, I always call it grown up storylines, where they're not maybe necessarily staying within the rules of that genre. And it kind of just drives me mad, and it makes me I honestly want to shout at people saying, "No, it's not YA, it's adult." Because yeah, it is scary. You're right, for a young girl, a young guy, to kind of be reading about this violence, or that what's happening in the world. I think Pretty Little Liars was one that I kind of got stuck on, because I originally seen the TV series, and then I read the series, and the series is very YA, but the show isn't.
Right.
So it was very conflicting, because as the show went on, I felt like the books grew with the show, and it kind of made it not YA to me in the end. And I think it was like, yes, there is a place for crime in YA, and I think you can't hide certain things from kids. But at the same point, I think we need to be careful of the ideas that we're giving to kids, because this is the idea phase of their development. This is when, they're actually coming up with schemes and plans and tricks to play on us as adults. And maybe we don't want them thinking about murder and all this other stuff. It's maybe not where we want them to be going.
Yeah.
So, I kind of always think maybe there should be like another separate kind of new adult. Well, there is new adult now, but I think a lot of those kind of books should be in like a new adult section, and have it just be not, clean crime novels if they want to read crime, rather than them coming out of YA and, say, jumping into a really dark crime novel that might traumatize them beyond belief. I just think we could do more with genres, and I think more with labeling and marketing to make it an easier journey through the books for the kids and for the adults.
Yeah. I mean, we if you think children's and YA, there are no genres in it, are there? Whereas in adult books, there's fantasy and crime and blah 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 blah. There's so many.
It goes on and on and on. Yeah,
and that's fine. I kind of like that it's not kind of shoved into genres. But I mean, I was reading somewhere that there was a TV show that got cancelled, and it was the Babysitters. Is it called the Babysitters Club? Yep. And how basically the TV industry is not interested in making shows for teenagers of that age. So they're not interested in teen. And you kind of got to, in a way, publishing is the same in that teen is only just becoming a genre or a section. And you've got things like Heartstopper on Netflix, which is doing an incredible job. And that is exactly teen. And why aren't we? Because, the rules of writing children's is you tend to write for middle grade. Your character tends to be about 11 or 12. So they're a couple of years older than the people who are reading it. And then in YA, likewise, they've got to be a couple of years older. So we're effectively not writing about 13, 14-year-olds or maybe 15. We're writing about the whole, and it's a massive time for children where actually they don't need to be reading up. They don't need to aspire to be someone a couple of years older than them. They actually want to read about people who are going through the same things as them, or who are going on adventures so that they can escape from being them. And
exactly.
so we're kind of applying all these rules that, the characters must be a couple of years older, blah, blah, blah. Actually, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand.
No, it doesn't.
And I'm sure there's talking to kids in schools and talking to my own children, there is a gap, but no one is really trying to fill it. And I love writing teen, and as much as it's a difficult one to get published because there's not enough. I think bookshops are beginning to get better at doing teen sections, but the buyers haven't caught on, and they're not necessarily buying the right books.
I think what's happened is YA is getting bought by women that are a lot older than teenagers. And that's kind of where a lot of these publishers are marketing those for.
Yes.
Like, if you look at Vampire Diaries TV series, it's very different to Vampire Diaries the book.
Right.
And she got fired off that series. She got fired off her own book series because she killed off Elena in book 2.
Right.
I think it was book 2 or book 1. And she was very open that it was for sort of the new adult kind of age group. But because a new adult wasn't really a new adult, she got flung into YA, and it got very confusing for the readers. And I'm like, there's no way I'm letting my 13 or 14-year-old daughter read that. No, 16, 17 maybe, but not 13 or 14. So, like, I have that almost in my head as well. Like, I grew up with Catherine Cookson, and my mom just thought, oh, that's great for, all ages. No, Mom. It really wasn't. It's the same, whereas my mom never, she never controlled what I read. So, because I couldn't always get books out, I would sneak into her room and steal the Mills and Boon books out of her bedroom door, and I'd run into the... And I'm only like 8 or 9 doing this, and I'm thinking to myself, really, Mom? Like, maybe be a bit wiser. But the great thing about it, though, was, like, me and my mom then, when she started to realize that I was just reading anything, she kind of went on this reader journey with me, and we explored Harry Potter came out, and we explored Harry Potter together, and then we explored Debbie Glory together. And it was almost like she was getting that learning aspect of reading at the same time as I was. And it kind of bonded us. But I still think as an industry, we've got a lot more, I think, steps to put in place so that we're catering from the very young all the way through, rather than getting this confusion of different genres and different brackets and things. And I just hope that we get there. I just think it'll take some time.
Yeah.
So when you're writing, I think you mentioned this earlier, that you talk about it being like shards, you're writing in sections. So funnily enough, my question was, when you write, is it like a movie or a jigsaw puzzle? I have a funny feeling you're going to say jigsaw puzzle now.
Well, no, it's both. It's both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's when I begin, it's more like a movie, especially if I've got actually with Coming Up for Air, the characters really played out in my head. Partly because the main character is she wants to be a documentary filmmaker, so there's a lot of comments where she says looks to camera, and then she'll say it's a way of listening to what her inner thoughts are. So with that, I had a very clear idea. It was like a movie playing in my head. But what I tend to get to a stage where I realize I'm stuck, and that's when it becomes a jigsaw puzzle, because I start looking at the scenes and I just start, I go, well, that needs to move earlier and that needs to move later. And I kind of, my draft just looks horrendous because, I've kind of got my part 1, part 2 kind of written in, and then I'll be moving all these things around and all these scenes, and there'll be little sections of dialogue and little sections or if I don't know what's going to go there, I'll just write in capital letters something needs to go here, or this needs to happen here, or, you know, whatever the point of the chapter is. And so it's kind of a little bit of both. If it's going well, I'd say it's a movie. And if it's going badly, it's a jigsaw.
It's good to hear both, because a lot of people just say, oh, it's a movie. And I'm thinking, because especially some of the crime writers, I'm like, it has to be kind of like...
Well, surely it has to be a jigsaw. Yeah.
But no, a lot of them say it's actually like a movie, funnily enough.
Oh, wow.
So which character has stayed with you either the most or the longest that you've been writing?
Ooh.
Is there anyone that sort of hung on and said, hey, I'm not quite finished telling you my story yet?
No, I don't think so. I do find that once I've moved on to the next thing, I almost forget. I definitely forget the names of characters. And so
I do that too.
People talk to me about, you know, the characters in Fig Swims the World. I sort of have to go, okay, who are we talking about here? And I just have to, you know, have a good think. So no, I feel like I've left them behind. So I'm quite happy to move on to the next one. So no, I don't think any of them have clung on.
See, my problem is because I don't like writing endings. If I'm writing a series, then they do hang around.
Yes.
But I have a terrible habit. If I've written something and when I write the words "the end" or "the end for now," I totally forget the book completely. It deletes. It's like my brain says, "Oh, you've done that story."
Yeah.
That pathway disappears and a new pathway opens up for a new adventure. Which is really bad because when I'm sitting talking to fans, I almost have to read the book before I go to an event.
Yeah.
So that I can remember what happened. And I hate it when people ask me, what were you thinking when you wrote this section? And I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm like 5 books on from there. Like you don't know the answer to that. So you have to kind of come up with something off the top of your head that sounds like what could have happened while you were writing it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. I love that question because, like, sometimes there is like characters that you would never know about. Some writers reveal.
Yeah.
But I understand like what you're saying. So, is there a character that you wish you could write more about? Is there maybe somebody that's been a smaller character in one of your books that you kind of wish that you'd explored a little bit more, or you would like to go back and explore?
Not massively. I think someone suggested to me that that there should be a sequel to Coming Up for Air. It's kind of she classed it, and in the same way as I classed it, it's got an Outer Banks feel to it. So it's kind of an Outer Banks meets West Side Story without the fighting. There's a rivalry and a mystery going on, and she suggested that there could be a sequel, and actually there could be a sequel. I could very well see there's 4 main characters in it, and I could see them going off on a different adventure and taking in, I'd quite like to not have to create the whole backdrop.
World again.
It'd be nice to go back to these characters. But I haven't done so far. I think that's the sort of thing you need to be invited to do by your publisher. So
you never know. They might come tapping on your mind someday and say, "Hey, it's our turn."
Yeah.
I always say that.
Saying that, in my first book, Fig Swims the World, there's a character called the Boss.
All right.
And she's kind of based on Emily Blunt in Devil Wears Prada. So that's who was so she's not so much, she's more of a middle 20-something, 30-something-year-old woman, but she's so sarcastic and scathing and cutting. I would quite like to write a book with more of her in it because she's just so fun to write.
So that's maybe something good for your readers and for the listeners to kind of get behind.
Yeah.
I bet you're going to get lots of messages now saying, when are you writing that? And you'll be like, oh, darn it.
Yeah.
I've done that to myself a bunch of times. So what techniques have you found the most helpful? And has there been any techniques that you just wish you had not tried?
In terms of writing?
Yeah.
The technique, I've just bought Save the Cat, actually, because I'm kind of interested. I haven't barely started reading it, to be honest. but I'm kind of interested in the number game where you have to introduce your inciting incident at a certain point, and I don't know, something like 10% through or something like that. So I'm interested to do that. So my next book, I want to plot completely and see whether or not that completely destroys the creativity, because I don't normally write like that. The techniques that I find useful when I've got writer's block, and which my husband suggested I do, was to write dialogue. And because that's, for me, I write dialogue all the time. It's almost where I begin completely. So write dialogue and nothing else. So, write whatever is being said. Don't even bother saying anything about who's saying it, but just write the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and see where that takes me.
Cool.
So
that is an interesting take, actually. I've not actually heard that one before, so that's kind of cool. I mean, I'm a plotter. I did start off as a pantser, and then I kind of used to get myself in a lot of sticky situations and be like, oh, what am I doing here? But when I thought it the same way as you, I thought if I start plotting, I'll lose the draft, I'll lose where I am. But actually what I found was the notes that I made, in chapter breakdowns is how I went. It almost was like I could recapture that moment of when I was writing it down. It just kind of came back up. It's like I was touching it for the very first time, or it was coming to me for the very first time. And it didn't make it easier to read. However, the areas of where I would get stuck with plotting seemed to be where I got stuck with the writing of it. So I almost had to kind of add extra notes to kind of help myself through that. But yeah, it does make a difference. It does help because you're less stuck, I think, with the notes, because you can almost glance at your notes. Some people color coordinate them, but I can't because it just does funny things to my eyes. But I can almost glance at it and be like, I know where I'm going. I know how to get over this obstacle. I have a better chance of having an easier time writing it. Right now, I am actually technically pantsing and plotting at the same time, which I'm hating, because what happened is my husband was putting a notebook away from me, and now he can't find it, and I can't find it. And we have no idea where it is, and I got 24 novels in it.
Oh my God.
And unfortunately, one of them's been requested, and I'm thinking, oh my God, so I'm trying to recall it from memory and making notes, and then I'm trying to write it at the same time. And my editor's like, are you crazy? But I think I'm doing okay because I've done both techniques. So I'm sort of surviving a little bit. So like if I go in the car, I might sit and make notes. And of course I'm doing this with uni as well, which is making it even more interesting. I swear my final paper is going to have like a part of my book in it is an argument or something. And the teacher's going to be like, well, wait, what's this, Kristen? But no, like I've almost had that interesting experience of taking both of them together and trying them.
Yeah.
So don't be scared to try the plotting, because it really doesn't take that kind of fun out of it.
Yeah, but the problem in the book I've written recently, I had to plot part 2, and so I did.
Yeah.
But my brain decided to write all of it because I know.
Oh no.
Because I know exactly what I want to write. There's the boredom level of, well, I've written it now, and in my head I've written it. And I just like, I'm not interested in actually getting it down on the page. If you could literally lift it out of my head and put it on the page, that would be good. But 2, my brain
I think we all wish that.
Yeah, of course. My brain decided to write it all at the same time, and it properly stopped me from writing for a little while. And then I had to be very strict with myself and say, no, today you're writing this chapter, and this chapter is about X. And so there are obviously ways to go around it, but that was my first kind of introduction into plotting, was that it just made me very uncomfortable, like it wasn't as much fun. But I am open to it. I'm going to give it a try, so we'll see.
That's good. I mean, as I say to people, like sometimes when you're trying different techniques, it might not work out for you, but you'll get something out of it. You'll learn something. It's at least that's what I like to think. Doesn't always work out that way. So we're now moving into the life portion of the podcast, and this is where we kind of demythify authors. We don't all live in really big rich houses with servants who go to Tesco and Asda for us. And we're not all kind of antisocial either. We all have friends, and we go to coffee shops, and we go shopping just like everybody else. So that's kind of the fun part of this, is to get to know you as a person rather than obviously as an author where we focus on your work. So the first question is, what's the first thing you do when you want to de-stress from editing and writing?
I go swimming. I love swimming.
I love that answer. It's just like, I go swimming.
Yeah, absolutely. If I want to clear my head, there's a quarry that I swim in all year round.
Wow.
It's like it's a properly run club thing, so they've got lifeguards and everything. It's about a 20-minute drive. Put on the music that I want to listen to, and go for a swim. Love it all year round, and it just completely clears my head. The winter swimming is more about being at one with nature, getting as much sunshine and daylight into me as I possibly can. So from a mental health point of view, it's amazing.
It's very important, yeah.
And then now we're in May, it's getting warmer, so it's much more about swimming the distance and getting the fitness up. So it kind of has different things for me at different. And then, of course, being a photographer, I take my camera. I've got a GoPro that I can strap on around my body, and so I'll go and take photographs of the bubbles, because there's divers also diving in the quarry, and it's really clear blue water, so it's beautiful. So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of many things for me.
I like that. It sounds really fun and very different to any other answer we've ever had, so I love that. So are you a crafty person by nature?
Crafty as in
like sewing,
making things. I see. Yes.
Yeah, like arts and crafts.
Yes. I'm not an artist. I can't draw, although I occasionally like to try. I'm more of a knitter. Definitely not a sewer.
That's
I
good.
like knitting, and I got into a bit of cross stitch during lockdown. So I did a couple of those things you can get online. So yeah.
Oh, the cushions, or was it diamond painting?
There's I did a portrait of Virginia Woolf that you can buy online, and you kind of use cross stitch a portrait. So at some point, I'm going to get that framed and have up on the wall.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And apparently, you can do your own self portrait, which would be kind of bizarre. I do like doing. It's
very difficult, but you can see if you get the stamped version, it's easier.
Yes.
Rather than trying to do the counted, because the counting used to drive me so up the wall, because you can't just put it down and go away and come back.
No.
Because, when we got married, I got a paint by numbers version, a diamond version, and a cross-stitch version. And the cross-stitch version I planned to keep for myself. However, not had time to work on it. But I did the paint by numbers one, and my mom's like, no, I don't have any more space for paintings. You keep it. So we hung it. And my husband would be like, oh, I really like that. I really like that you went and did that. I don't like it, but he likes it, and that's the important thing. But it was really good, because during lockdown, I found that writing was harder for me because I wasn't going out on the buses and kind of going about and getting that conversation and that inspiration. So I had to kind of have parts of the day where I would go and do something else. So I'd go do diamond painting, or paint by numbers, or I would go and I would sew, and I've sewn a lot. But I grew up with that. Like, my grandmother was a professional knitter by the time she was 8. We're part of the Jimison wool factory as a family from Shetland. So there's a lot I always say crafting legacy there.
Yeah.
But I was better with the cross stitch, so I kind of went in that direction, much to my nan's chagrin. She wasn't too pleased with that, but it was almost part of her ladies training for me growing up. She wanted me to be a lady in this sort of idea of ladyism that she wanted, and my mum was very much on board with that. So I learned to cook, I learned to do the housework, and I learned to sew and knit and do all those sort of things. So comes in handy now when I think about it, but back then when I was a teenager, I hated it.
Yeah.
So I myself, as the listeners know, have a long-term health condition called idiopathic rheumatoid arthritis. I swear I'm not calling you an idiot because I have had that response a couple of times. And that kind of really makes me slow down and appreciate the day. So what makes you sort of slow down and smell the roses and just really enjoy your day?
I like being outside. I like being in the garden. I like being amongst the nature. So my favourite place is to sit at the end of the day with a cup of decaf coffee, watching the sunset,
I
feeling
love
the
that.
sun on my face type of thing. So yeah, it's being outside. I think I just, yeah, it's where I feel the most myself. And again, that ties into all the swimming really, that, it ties
Yeah.
me back to nature. And if
It's
I
so
go anywhere, I'm
funny.
always near water. So
Yeah, and it's so funny you say that. When you're saying that, I'm thinking how much you would love to be in Shetland in the summer, where
oh,
the sun doesn't set.
oh wow,
So it's up like from, I think it's like May all the way through to September. It's just constant daylight.
oh wow,
Because we get very little daylight. I think it's only a couple hours, a day during the day in the winter that we have sunlight. So for us, like, we all go a bit crazy in the summer. I will not deny that. Shetland people do get a little bit nuts because there's so much light, and we're in general a very creative group of people. So you'll see so many people out at weird, wonderful hours, just enjoying it. And the northern lights up there
oh
are actually amazing. You would have so much fun photographing that.
mm.
And if you can go to one of the sort of more kind of protected areas where it's not so windy and cold, you would get some really fantastic, because it almost looks like little people are dancing across the water
Oh,
because they
that'd be
actually touch the
amazing.
water. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it was just so funny when you said that. I was like, oh my God, she'd love that. And so many riders go up there for the
yes,
summer. It's like a
yeah.
riders retreat. They all go up there at different times, and they all ride, and they're really inspired. I highly recommend it to
Okay, I'm
people
going to
that like
add
to
it
go.
to my bucket list of places to swim and be.
I do apologize for the 14-hour boat trip though from Aberdeen. It is a
Yeah.
long trip on the boat, but it is
Wow.
well worth it.
Gosh.
The plane's a little bit more scary because it's like they miss 50 meters to one side, you're in the ocean. And
Right.
if they go 50 meters the other way, you're in the ocean. Or
Wow.
if they're 50 meters short of the runway, you're in the ocean.
Wow.
Same if they go too far off the end, you're in the
Gosh.
sea. So when you're coming to land, all you can see is water, and you're thinking, "Oh no, 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 no!" But they do hit the runway. Sometimes not very gently.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like boom, but
Yeah.
we do get there eventually. And that flight you can actually get from London, and it's I
Oh,
think
right.
about 3 hours, 3.5 hours.
Oh, wow. Gosh. Okay.
So yeah, it's great, and there's so much up there. There really is.
Mm.
It's a very tourism place nowadays. So yeah, and you can get to see the original Viking historical sort of things where there are actually villages still intact,
Oh, wow.
actual sort of villages and castles and stuff, and they've got some mystery around there that might inspire you when you come back.
Oh, yeah.
They're very good for inspiring. So we're now on to the I always say the listener's favorite part, the word game. And I
Oh,
know everyone dreads this because
yeah.
it's like, oh no, no. So we're actually not doing it with books this week. We're going to do word association, just to give you a little bit of a break, a little bit of fun. Do not worry about weird, because we've had some seriously weird responses on this show. So your first word is salt.
Salt. Well, sea.
See, it's going to be fun. It's going to be easy. Okay. Salted caramels.
Oh, gosh,
I
you
do
know what?
apologize if I get you hungry.
I love salted caramels. That's reminded me of going to stay in a hotel down in Cornwall where I got given some salted caramels. They're just lovely. So that's what it reminds me of. More sea, I'm afraid, I suppose.
Dude, yeah, I don't apologize. I grew up
Probably
with
all of
ocean
my
all around
answers
me.
are going to be water-based at this rate.
There's a theme with this, and you might pick up on the theme. So the next one is waves.
Waves. Oh, surfing.
There you go. See, not ocean. Cold.
Cold. Water. Oh no.
That's okay. Biting wind.
Oh, Lapland. I once went to Lapland and it was seriously cold. The coldest I've ever been.
I actually, funnily enough, spent 3 weeks there with the BBC, so I
How did
understand that
you?
greatly. I was 5 years old,
Oh
so
wow.
I was on the Jim will Fix It show, so it was a very weird experience.
Gosh.
What about a stony beach?
Stony Beach. Oh, Chesil Beach down in Dorset.
Ah,
Which did
okay.
you know that I think Jeff Bezos has he has $1 for every pebble that is on Chesil Beach, or he has
Oh,
more dollars than his pebbles on Chesil Beach, something like that.
yeah, I think it's
And
maybe the second way, yeah.
yeah, so it enables you to see just how much money he has.
Yes, I actually agree with that, yeah. I think that's quite awesome. Okay, so the next one is Northern Lights.
Philip Pullman.
Ooh, okay. I'm taken aback by that. I was not surprised by the
Well, that's the only thing. I mean, I have seen the Northern Lights when I was in Lapland, but I just think
yeah.
of the Northern Lights book, the Golden Compass.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, funnily enough, I do think that too. But I was kind of like, I wasn't sure about what people are going to say when I say that one, so I'm always surprised with that one. Hot chocolate.
Oh, Narnia.
I like that. Hot toddy. Now, I am so glad I do not have to explain what that is this time.
Hot toddy.
Yeah, it's an English drink, and with you have read it, because you were saying you've read Paul Dark. It's actually a drink that they drink in Paul Dark.
Oh, is it? I don't
Yeah.
know that. Yeah, I'd say cup when I hear that word then, because I don't really. It's just not one that's used anymore, really, is it?
I think it is, but I
Is
think it
it?
is for like period drama areas and stuff. So like
Okay, yeah, fair
Bath and
enough.
all
Yeah.
that kind of areas.
Mm.
Okay, so dogs barking.
Dogs barking. Annoying.
I would agree with that one very, very much so. Glass breaking is your final word.
Glass breaking. I don't have a word that I can think of, but I can see visually the shards of glass hitting the ground and that kind of noise that it makes.
Well, we could go with shards
Yep,
because
shard.
that
Okay,
was your
let's go with
first word
shards
there.
then. Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
there we go. We saved the day.
Fabulous.
Well, it's been so fantastic to have you on,
Oh, thank
and
you
I
for having
must
me.
say, I will love to have you back when you have your next novel out
Ah,
because you are totally amazing. I love all the different things you're doing, and to be able to talk to somebody about the market and all this other stuff has been absolutely amazing, and such it's been refreshing because sometimes we get so lost up in the characters in the books and stuff we actually forget about the business side of things, the
yeah,
actual publishing business. So it's nice to actually have those kind of conversations. So
brilliant.
I'm so honored for you to come on,
Thank
and
you.
this will be out in the middle-ish, endish of September.
Oh, brilliant.
So yeah, if there's any books you want to just plug before we go, then
Well,
please
just
feel
my
free.
my three coming up for air. Fig Swims the World, and my maths book is a STEM
Which we all talked about.
called Amazing Maths, but that's not out until January of next year.
I think there'll be a lot of people running for that one because I think there's a lot of parents that are like, I gotta teach my kids math.
Yeah,
So I think that one will do really well for you. I can't wait
excellent,
to see that one, and I'll
brilliant.
buy it for my hubby to give to keep for my niece so that she can have it when she's older. She's a bit of a smarty pants at the moment, so I'm kind of scared to give her the math. But yes, it's been lovely having you on. Everyone listen up. And next week we've got an even more incredible guest on. Her name is Sasha Summers, and I cannot wait to introduce you to her. So I'll see you all again next time.